Now from New York is Ukraine's ambassador to the United Nations, Yuriy Sergeyev. Ambassador, thanks for joining us. We've had some reports of ceasefire violations, but what is the Ukrainian government's reading of the situation on the ground right now?
It is still complicated, but Ukrainian government took the decision to cease fire. We observe violations in many cities and towns. Unfortunately, the other side does not respect the agreements reached in Minsk, but at any rate, we keep continuing not to launch fighting back.
Now, as far as the Ukrainian government is concerned, who is responsible on the rebel side for maintaining this agreement? You know, as we understand it, it's not one unified group there, it's different groups, different battalions. So who are you talking to?
So we spoke with two major representatives of Lugansk, so-called Lugansk People's Republic and Donetsk People's Republic, thinking that they have the influence on other commanders in the field. What we observing now that really the fighting is coming from different parts, but at the same time what we observed, the movements of the Russian troops inside the area controlled by the terrorists. That's why we keep addressing the Russian side to demonstrate the fidelity to what has been said. It means that for us it is still Russia Federation who could influence all of them.
There has been a proposal from the Russian President Vladimir Putin, and he's calling for a withdrawal of government forces, and he wants it to withdraw to a distance, and this is how the Russians put it, that would reduce the possibility of shelling of inhabited areas. That would reduce the number of civilian casualties. Is that acceptable to Ukraine?
The problem is that how to accept, how to treat the address of Putin. We can't trust Russia Federation until Russian military presence in Ukraine continues to remain, and until the Russian forces are so numerous concentrated alongside Ukrainian borders. That's why the best message from Russian side is to withdraw all their troops and weaponry, as well as the Russian citizens from Ukrainian territory. It would be much helpful than any kind of the peaceful appeals for those who are perpetrating all these problems for us. So we are ready to any kind of dialogue, but under the conditions that all the sides, not only separatists, but Russia Federation, do perform the right steps in the right direction. Right direction has been agreed recently in Minsk.
Right, but the difference here is that the Russians have been saying, and they've been saying consistently, that they are not involved in the fighting in Ukraine. They do concede that there may be Russian troops in Ukraine, but they're not fighting under the Russian flag. In fact, the Russians go one step further and say, insofar as the ceasefire agreement is concerned, we are not a party to it.
So not only Ukrainian side, but the international observers, including OSCE, noted that the shelling, heavy shelling from the Russian territory against Ukrainian territory happened several times. Observers also noted the presence of the Russian weaponry in Ukraine. But if even to speak on the direct aggression, it is also the international crime. Everybody could find that the Russian government encourages their citizens, including those who are on the military service, to come voluntarily to Ukraine and to assist the separatists. This is also a crime. Indirect aggression is also the crime, and we presented a lot of evidences of that, and Russia is ignoring any kind of the evidences which are coming from different states who, for example, have facilities, satellite facilities. They filmed the invasion from their territory, but they're denying whatever. They are denying that white is white. That's why it's not easy to cope in the Security Council here when they are denying whatever, despite the fact that everybody understands and have proofs of Russian direct and indirect involvement in the conflict.
Now, you have the Russians who are also coming under pressure from the European Union. The European Union is looking at imposing new sanctions, further sanctions on Moscow. Is that something that is supported by Ukraine? Would you like to see more sanctions imposed on Russia?
sanctions is a mechanism how to stop an aggression. The first sanctions, which were soft, then moderate, and even stronger, they didn't work. It means that if we are counting on sanctions, they should be sectoral and to be stronger, to make Russia understands that Russia could be in a full isolation if not to stop this kind of aggression. You know, exactly the experience from the sanctions against different countries in the world showed that they were not so efficient as expected to be. But there is some kind of the mechanism. We still thinking that they could impose some kind of the pressure on Russia to return back and to step back.
Well, all the evidence right now points to the fact that they're not being helpful, that Russian attitudes, in fact, are hardening. In fact, Moscow is now threatening sanctions of its own in retaliation.
Yeah, but at any rate, some of these sanctions implemented previously, they were harmful for them and painful. They recognize that. So if sanctions is focused on the major business of Ukraine, so as gas and oil, their military production, they could be more painful for them.
Right, and if you look at the diplomatic efforts that are now being made to resolve this crisis, the 12-point plan that you mentioned also calls for more power to be devolved to the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Is that something that you support? Is that something that's going to happen?
Exactly. So coming back to the month of June, the newly elected President Poroshenko, at the time he introduced his peaceful plan, where the decentralization of the power, not only in the rebelling regions, but all around Ukraine, was the utmost interest of the government. And this is what addressed also to the Lugansk and Donetsk. More power to the regions within the united Ukraine.
When we talk about more power to the regions, what kind of power are you talking about here? Because it also calls for elections, right?
So, yeah, it is re-elections. This is their right to appoint the governors, the mayors, not to be appointed as previously from the capital, but locally they could do themselves. As well, the economic and tax policy, as well as the regulation of some state politics in the trade, in social affairs. So they could have more power and to have more responsibility to govern themselves. But to be in the united, not federal Ukraine.
Now, NATO has just held its summit in Wales, in the United Kingdom. One of the things that came out of that summit was the establishment of what NATO calls a rapid deployment force in Eastern Europe. Would you like to see greater NATO involvement in resolving this crisis in Ukraine?
We have a right for self-defense and collective self-defense according to the Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Ukraine, in that context, may address to anybody in the world for the assistance. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. We are partners for NATO in the same status as Russia Federation is. It means we are partners for peace. This status does not permit NATO countries to bring their forces in the country. What NATO is speaking about, the enlargement of their presence in the eastern Ukraine, it means that the neighboring countries on the west of Ukraine. What we expect from NATO and to have more assistance in our military reforms. Army and the police were destroyed purposefully during the last regime, 3 years staying in the power. We need this assistance. We need to build new army. Naturally, we need assistance in the weaponry. We would like to buy sophisticated weaponry to resist the Russian Federation aggression, who are using the sophisticated weaponry. We don't have means to do that. But again, not everything is possible within NATO standards and regulations. So we need to have a special status. The only assistance we can have only in the area of non-lethal equipment, this is what was promised.
Ambassador, when we look at what is going on right now, what is your feeling about a diplomatic way out of this crisis? I mean, do you have any confidence that there could be a diplomatic way out of this?
Still, we are counting on the possibility of political and diplomatic settlement. We have partners who are trying to be our good moderators and mitigators in that conflict. From the west to the east, China was the first among those who proposed their mediation for the diplomatic solution. The West, we now observing that even the Russian friends, they are trying to mitigate and mediate. So still a lot of possibilities in the hands of the world diplomacy. We can count on that.
Ambassador Yuriy Sergeyev, thank you for joining us, sir.